From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of InFocus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. We are joined in the studio today by two guests, Therese Ross and Damon Accardi. Therese is the executive director of Rick's Place in Wilbraham, and Damon is the president of Accardi Financial Group. We're here to talk about grief. It's something that happens to every single one of us, but there is help out there specifically for the younger folks. And we will turn it over now to Therese. Therese, you're the executive director of Rick's Place. Give us a once-over. What is Rick's Place?
Sure. So Rick's Place is a nonprofit organization. We're located in Wilbraham, and we provide grief support for youth ages 5 to 18 and their caregivers after the death of someone significant. And we are an organization that exists because of the sad loss of Rick Thorpe, who grew up in Wilbraham and died in Tower 2 on 9/11.
Okay.
And his parents and high school friends and college friends all said, there's not enough support for families after someone dies. Let's put something together.
Did he leave small children behind? Was that sort of
so there was he had an 18-month-old daughter.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they recognized that families really need support after someone dies.
So how long has Rick's Place been around?
Well, it officially started in 2007. 2009 is when programming really got off to a bigger start.
Okay. And so, Damon, let's switch gears a little bit to your role with Rick's Place. Tell me a little bit about it.
So I'm not directly involved with Rick's Place, but we share, we're both in Post Office Park in Wilbraham, Mass.
Okay.
And by meeting Therese, we share a passion for tennis. I used to be a tennis player, and Therese still is. And we connected, and I got to learn a lot more about what Rick's Place does. And having lost my mother in 1996 when I was 17 years old, learning about the programming and the support that they provide families really could have come in handy for me and my family, 30 years ago when this happened to us. And it really struck a chord with me and my family, and I'm very passionate about helping them continue to help more people in the community who are struggling through grief.
It's interesting. You suffered the passing of your mom as a teenager. With your involvement now in Rick's Place, do you wish that that program and that service was available to you as a 17-year-old?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not going to use the term jealous, because that would be doing a disservice to the people who are going through it. But, in 1996, the medical community knew nothing about grief and how bereavement affects your brain. It changes your brain, actually. It was old school in the mid-90s. I was at Minnechaug, and, give the child some time and they'll get over it.
Right.
And seeing the programming that's done and how Therese and her staff and the volunteers help provide, this support to people nowadays, I think is really, really valuable. And I wish that we had it then. And just goes to show how far the medical community has come in terms of dealing with grief. It's not really, we're not thumbing our nose at it anymore. I remember seeing my first sports psychologist at Penn State. Back then, my coach wasn't very supportive of me going to see a sports psychologist. Where now
times are different.
Now today, everything's about mental health, and it's very in the news. It's very, publicly correct to talk about that. It wasn't 30 years ago.
Trace, that's a good segue. How much has Rick's Place grown in the 15, 16 years since the first program started?
Yeah, certainly quite significantly. So we probably have 5 times as many family participants as we've had in the past. And as Damon referred to the changes in the brain, one of the things we know is that grief is a natural response to the death of someone. Right. So it's not itself a mental health issue, but we do know that if grief is unexamined and sort of kicked down the road, it can lead to mental health challenges, right? So it exacerbates mental health challenges if it's not addressed.
So the staff at Rick's Place works with who? They work with
Yeah, that's a great question.
They work with children, they work with parents, they work with the whole group?
So actually, the way it works is we have anywhere between 10 and 14 volunteers who are trained by us on how to facilitate peer grief support groups. And I emphasize the word peer because it really is about providing community spaces where kids and adults feel less isolated after their loss. One of the things we know is that people feel like this happened to only me. Nobody can understand my experience. Right. And while grief is unique, it's also universal. And so our trained facilitators work with groups of kids. It can be 5 to 8-year-olds, 9, 10, 11 to 15, 15 to 18, right? So we cover the 5 to 18 range, and they're doing peer support together where they're focused on coping strategies, managing the loss. What are the changes that the family has gone through? How are kids prepared to manage those changes? At the same time, staff are supporting the adults in peer support groups for the adults that's focused on how do you parent a child who's grieving, often while you yourself, the caregiver, are grieving.
Also, right. So the staff at Rick's Place, are they paid staff? Are they volunteer staff? Where do they come from?
So,
what's their background to be able to deal with this?
So we're a tiny staff. So a program director, myself, executive director, we have a part-time office manager. So my program director and I are full-time. My program director was in hospice care. She was a child life specialist, comes in with a lot of skills. None of us have professional degrees in therapy or counseling because we don't need that for the peer support model. Okay. It's really about how do you provide a safe space for kids and families to feel seen, to feel as if the community understands their loss, and to feel less isolated.
Interesting. There's a lot more to talk about for Rick's Place. We're coming back after this break. We'll see you in a moment.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry. Across the desk from me today are Therese Ross and Damon Accardi. We're talking about grief and managing grief, specifically with those children ages 5 to 18. Thank you both for joining me today. Therese, what are some of the programs that kids can experience by age group?
Yeah. So the way it works with the 5 to 18-year-olds on site is they come and they participate for an hour plus programming where there are various topics that are covered, facilitated by our volunteers. And that's sort of the gold standard of our programming. We want to provide peer support for kids and their adults. When we can't get the entire family, we created another set of programs, which is our in-school programs. And so we often work with schools throughout the Pioneer Valley, and we go in and we run 6-week grief support programs for youth in area schools.
Okay.
And that's 1-hour sessions for 6 weeks. We go in and we do a modified peer support program like what we do on site. And then the third thing that we do as an organization is we provide professional development to school personnel, practitioners, all about the impact of grief. Those frontline people who often forget how long grief impacts kids, right? I mean, we all know youth are resilient and we count on that. But that doesn't mean that they aren't struggling after the death of someone, right? They're not the same kid they were the day after death that they were the day before.
Right. So do you guys find the interaction among the kids, I would think that's the most beneficial because, it's different from a leader of a group who may be 25, 55, 75 years old versus two 12-year-olds sitting there going, hey, this is what I'm going through.
Totally, right? They feel like they're the only ones. They come to Rick's Place. They realize they're not the only ones. And it doesn't fix it. I mean, there's no fixing grief, right? You can't fix it. But I think to be fair, if we go back to Damon and say, hey, when you were 17, how many people did you know who had a parent die?
Probably
not many.
Exactly.
Not many.
Now, so thinking about that, when you were 17, what did you do? Was that the era of just, hey, life goes on, move on, suck it up, get back to class?
Yeah, I went to school the next day. I was a kid who wanted normalcy back.
Right.
I was craving that after it happened. Back then the support wasn't there, so they let me go back to class. And my life spiraled a little bit, because of that. And I think being able to have peer support with other people, I think when you lose a parent, especially when you're in high school or even younger, you always feel like I'm the only one here who is dealing with this. When you get in a safe space environment with someone else close to your age, there's a connection that immediately happens. And we can see that through programming. And not that kids that are 14, 15, and 16 are going to truly open up.
Right.
But they feel more at ease talking to someone else.
Well, when you look
age.
across the table, or look, if you're in a group of, I think you said there are small groups.
Yeah. So we have 5 to 10 kids in a group.
Yeah. So you look across and you see somebody of a same age group within a year or two going through the exact same thing. It has to help a lot for a kid.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I would also say, not to interrupt, but just when kids come into the building and they see, how many kids do we have sometimes?
34.
Right.
Wow.
So when you go through this, you're like, why me? Why did this happen to just me?
Right.
And then you're in Wilbraham and you go into a space and there's 33 other kids and you're like, okay, this does happen to other people. It's more common than maybe I'm feeling inside. Maybe I should open up more and learn more about some of the experiences some of these other kids have had.
Are the kids there, is it a common denominator they've lost a parent or?
Great question.
Yeah.
So we focus on parent or sibling deaths.
Okay.
Right. And there are a lot of sibling losses.
Right.
And we will have a child who's had a grandparent caregiver die. One of the things that we try to be really careful of is having a child whose grandparent died. We know that's a big loss, but they may not realize that parents can also die. And then when they get into a room with kids where there are a lot of parents or siblings who've died, that's not necessarily in their best interest, right? Yeah. And so we do focus on parent death and sibling death.
It's interesting. I was exposed to death at a very young age. I look at my parents' and my grandparents' generation. When I was a kid, they were all dying off. So I was exposed to death at a very young age. I still remember going to my first wake. And I'm 58 years old now, so that was 50 plus years ago, and I still remember that. Do those kids have that conversation about, I hate to say it, seeing a dead body?
Oh, yeah.
My girls are pushing 30 years old. They hate going to wakes because they don't like to see a dead human being laying in front of them.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. So one of the things that we know about kids is they often don't want to tell their surviving caregiver about things that are hard for them. And they don't want to upset their caregiver. They know the caregiver already is upset, right? And so talking about cremation, talking about what the funeral was like, talking about what it feels like to look at a body that has died, those are conversations that sometimes they're hesitant to have with their grown-up. But when they're together with a group of trained facilitators and other kids, that's a big conversation.
I will say, though, I think because I was exposed to death at a young age, and I think about all the wakes that I went to really between the time I was probably 5 and 15, there had to be a dozen at least, I hate to say it. I think I kind of got a scab, like a thicker skin. Yeah. It doesn't affect me as much as I know it affects other people.
So it's interesting. One of the things I think about when you say that is I think as adults, it's really important to be the person that a kid can talk to about those experiences, right? So were you able to ask questions about, what's happened? Why did they put them in that box?
Right.
And so lots of times kids know my grown-up is not the one to ask that to. And that's one of the reasons that we try to sort of share with the wider community. How do you be the person that kids can have these open and honest conversations with? Because they have a lot of questions and they wonder about a lot of things. And often, if they don't have accurate explanations, age-appropriate explanations for how someone died or, what went on, they often hold themselves accountable. And that's one of the pieces that we really try to help kids with.
It's funny you say that because I think back now, I probably could not have had those conversations with my parents It was generational. It was just generational. So you kind of have these thoughts in your head of what death is, and it's scary as a kid. It's scary as an adult, but you just don't have that outlet, or I didn't have that outlet. So it's nice that you guys are creating the outlet to have open conversations about someone passing.
Well, you bring up, the wake and the funeral, which is just one aspect. Kids who've lost a parent, it changes almost every major. We're at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
A holiday is a really hard time for kids who've lost a parent.
Right.
Mother's Day, Father's Day. You graduate from high school, when you graduate from college, when you get married, and now I'm 46. I have 2 daughters of my own. Now we have to take my daughters to see, they call her Grammy Pam. My 5-year-old in the car, let me see her once a year. Christmas.
Right.
I don't live close to where she's buried. My 5-year-old said, well, I don't want to go. It's boring. I don't want to talk to the stone. Right. So now I have to, now I'm a parent, having lost a parent, having now to try to parent my own children, right, with no grief support of any professional kind when I grew up. Kids nowadays have much more access to Therese and Rick's Place to be able to handle these conversations. We should probably talk about that, by the way. But it changes every aspect of your life, from parenting yourself to having to go through these major life events.
Great segue. We are up on our second commercial break. We have more on Rick's Place when we come back, so stay with us.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. Today, we're talking about grief and the benefits Rick's Place in Wilbraham has to help your kids manage the grief process. Joining me across the desk today are Therese Ross, the executive director of Rick's Place, and Damon Accardi. He is a volunteer and helps out at Rick's Place and has also experienced grief as a young boy. Thank you both for joining me. Greatly appreciate the open conversation about grieving, because everyone is different. Everyone grieves differently. Damon, you grieve differently when your mom passed, and I grieve when my mom passed. But we're very fortunate that right here in Wilbraham we have a place like Rick's Place to help those kids understand and manage their own grief. Therese, we talked about some of the individual programs that the kids participate in. Let's fast forward. Do you hear now of kids that may have gone through the program 10 years ago or so, and the benefit that they received from the experience of Rick's Place?
Yeah, so I can think of a couple of kids whose caregivers have stayed in touch with us, and they have said how valuable the experience was. It came at a time when the kids felt really alone with their loss experience, and being in that group setting allowed them to recognize they weren't the only ones. It is really important to remember that just because kids participate in our program, it doesn't mean that they get over the loss.
Nobody ever gets over loss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Never do. And it's sometimes hard for people to understand the permanence of the absence after a death. And what Rick's Place does is it provides that community so kids can look back and recognize that there was a place where they were seen and heard after the death, and they felt a part of a community that understood.
It's interesting, and Damon, you can probably attest to this more than anybody. I heard a phrase, the grief never goes away. It's how you manage the grief day to day.
Yeah.
Because your mom died how long ago?
It'll be 30 years in May.
It'll be 30 years. So you've been managing, you have the same grief, but you've been managing that grief for 30 years.
Exactly.
So Therese, to your point, the kids have to learn how to manage it now.
Yes.
Now that the funeral's over and back to real life, but in 10, in 15, and 20 years from now.
Right. And one of the things that we really emphasize is that kids have the capacity to manage this loss experience with support. And so we really encourage adults in their lives to make sure that they are getting the support they need, because the parenting role doesn't stop.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because you're helping the parents, you're helping the child learn to grieve, but you're also helping the parents manage the child. So the parents are grieving, or the siblings are grieving. You're all grieving at the same time. So Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say this touches on, what children actually go through. The best time after you lose a parent is right away, because everybody in your community, all of your neighbors are stopping by, they're bringing food. And then 3 months later, everybody goes back to their lives. And you and your family are left trying to pick up the pieces. And I didn't have Rick's Place. Having Rick's Place now is a place for, my surviving parent and me and my sibling to go to get information about how to continue on with your life and manage the grief that we've been talking about, knowing it's never going to go away. But that loneliness that happens, and when everybody else goes back to their life, is the hardest part.
So how long do people participate in the programs? And the reason I ask that is because you triggered a memory. The first year is brutal. The birthdays, the Mother's Day, Father's Day, the anniversaries, whatever it might be. But that close knit of, hey, I'm thinking about you on the birthday of so-and-so. You send the text, you make the phone call. But it's that second year. Everybody thinks it's the first year is the hardest, but it's that second year I fear is, well, I'm still having that grief, but nobody's texting me to say, hey, I'm thinking about you on this birthday.
Yeah. Personally speaking, the second year is really, really brutal. I always hate in our peer grief groups with the adults when somebody says, oh, yeah, the first year's bad, but the second year's worse. Oh, don't tell them yet.
Right.
It is. And again, you don't know when the moments of activation of your grief will happen down the road when you're 5-10 years out. Those still happen. And so there's
always a trigger.
It always is. Just that thing that and we know the classic ones, like Damon mentioned, the holidays and weddings and graduations and all of that. But then there are just the other things that can come up. And so what we really are trying to help people understand is that we all have the strength to manage this. It can just feel terrible at times. And so that's where a community makes a difference.
So how long do people take advantage of the program?
So it depends on the kid and the adults, right? So they can come for as long as they want. And what we say is you keep coming until it isn't what you need anymore.
So are there times where somebody might take advantage of Rick's Place soon after a passing? Spend, a couple of months managing it, coming to terms with their grief. And then to our point of year 2 is hard. Yeah. Do people come back?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. So we start with families 3 months or more after a death, right? So that first 3 months is an absolute fog. Nobody is in any place to get peer support, right? It just doesn't work. So we work with families anytime after. We have families who come to us when they've had a death 3 years ago and they've never been a part of our program before, right? Wow. So whenever they've had the death and they're ready to process it with a group, we can bring them in 3 months or after. We have families who come to us for a semester, then they stop. They may come back again. Mm-hmm. Or we have families who come to us for 2 or 3 years. And then they decide, okay.
What's the frequency with, is it a weekly thing, a monthly thing?
It's twice a month for the fall semester and the spring semester. And then in the summer, we do summer programming.
Interesting. This has been a fascinating conversation. Therese and Damon, I want to thank you both so very much for giving us some additional insight into Rick's Place. It's a wonderful resource right here to all of us in Western Mass. So thank you both very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.